So there's a ship out at sea, and what you see in the wake of the ship is there's this bright, glowing yellow ball of light that kind of comes up to the wake and sits there and then goes back down. And the Marines were telling me, as we're sitting there talking, they were saying that they were seeing what they described as flying ball bearings flying over the battle zone. And that just caught my ear, and I told them, I said, hey, I think I've seen that over Camp Fallujah. I've seen a few of those just floating over. As they sat there and talked about them, they said these things were pulling some pretty fantastic maneuvers. They said they would zip in and zip out was the words they were using. They said they would zip in, hang around, kind of float, and they would zip out. And the recon Marines were telling me that they were shooting at these things. One guy said that one flew over and zipped in and just hovered over him about 50 feet in the air. I pretty much believed America told the truth and was a shining beacon on the hill of morality. And I came back from Iraq pretty broken about our government, realized that the American government is a pretty shady organization.
Now, before we jump into the topic of this conversation, just want to make everyone aware that I've recently been demonetized on YouTube. I will be able to reapply for monetization on the 26th of November, but until then, YouTube has turned the tap off in terms of being able to make advert revenue, which was quite a significant portion of my income on a monthly basis. I've had a really amazing outpour of support from people via PayPal, Buy Me a Coffee, Patreon, contributing to try and help me get through this short little process of demonetization on YouTube. And I just want to say thank you so much to all of you that have already donated and given what you can. It's really much appreciated. Anyone else who's able to do that to help support my work whilst I kind of navigate through this brief period of demonetization on YouTube, that would be much appreciated. They didn't give me a solid reason why I was demonetized. It was apparently a copyright infringement, but they didn't specify the video. I tried to reappeal and they denied my reappeal. So yeah, that's my situation right now.
I'm going to withhold my last name if that's okay. A lot of folks out there in that Twitter sphere, they know my last name, but when I first got on there and started talking about a lot of this stuff, it opened up a can of worms, and people started contacting me and harassing me. So I about 3 years ago, I took my last name off of my Twitter profile, or X profile as it is now, but the name's Brandon. So I joined the military straight out of high school. I started off as an enlisted man. I was from Dallas, Texas area. I joined when I was 18. Did 10 years as an enlisted man. I was an aviation ordnanceman, so I was a bomb builder, bomb loader. Also worked on the bomb racks and the gun systems on the birds. And so I did that for 10 years. Was on several aircraft carriers doing that. Kind of got tired of that. Had a son that was born. Decided I wanted to do something I thought that was going to be a little bit more safe. So I decided to transition into the medical field. And I went to college and got my nursing degree and became a trauma nurse. But first rattle out of the box, I got my commission, became a naval officer. And first rattle out of the box, I graduated 2000 from college. And when the Iraq war broke out, they decided they wanted to attach me to the Marine Corps, what they call going green side. So they attached me to the Marine Corps as a trauma nurse. So when the Marines go out, we go out with them. So I ended up by doing 13 years as a trauma nurse, but my deployment with the Marines was all of 2004. I got out to Fallujah, Iraq, Camp Fallujah. We were about, I guess we were about 3 miles, it seems, 3, maybe 4 miles southeast of Fallujah itself, where they set up Camp Fallujah. And I got out there in January. I want to say it was the second week of January, maybe the third week of January. And I got home about 2 or 3 days right before Thanksgiving. So I went from January until November out there in Fallujah, Iraq. So pretty much all of 2004. I was in the military for 23 years. And actually, believe it or not, that wasn't my first experience seeing something weird out in Iraq. Aboard the USS Saratoga in 1992, I saw something, and we might talk about that another time. But specifically to Fallujah, Iraq, what happened out there was so like I had told you in a message, when we were out there, you tried to do things that made you feel as normal as possible, because it was just chaos out there. So we tried to do things that could make us feel like we were living somewhat of a normal life. So me and some of the other Marines that were out there, when they were back at the base, we would try to, like I said, try to unwind. And one of the things we did to unwind was we would go out. We were stationed on what was, I guess, I don't know what it looked like. It was some kind of old military training facility, because there was a bunch of bunkers on the base. there were some old housing units, basically what you would see like in a military boot camp. So they were run down and dilapidated, but that's what we were staying in. But next to that, there was, like I said, there was a lot of bunkers, and there were some cement pads on top of these bunkers. So what we would do is we would go up there and fire up some grills and get some grills going and try to barbecue and listen to music. And we would lay out to get some sun, strip down to our skivvies and just lay out in the sun. And the first time I saw something unusual out there, me and a couple of Marines were laying out there in our skivvies, just looking up at the sky. And I saw what I thought was a Mylar balloon. I saw just a silver Mylar balloon just floating. But what caught my eye was how it was round. Typically with a Mylar balloon, it kind of looks like more of like a heart shape or a flat pancake. It's a little bit more oblong, but this was just spherical, and it looked just like I said, it looked like a Mylar balloon floating in the sky. I saw it, thought it was weird. It kind of just gradually floated past us out of sight, and so really didn't think much about it. But over the course of my 11 months on the base, I would see these things more frequently. I think I saw them maybe 5-6 times while I was on the base. But what caught my ear rather was again on these cement bunker areas where we would hang out. It was kind of a gathering spot at nighttime after everybody had finished after the Marines had come back in and finished their patrols and done whatever they were going to do. We would all kind of sit out there and just tell sea stories, as we called them in the Navy. But just swap stories. And so I started hearing these Marines talking about these, what they were calling these flying ball bearings. I heard a couple of Marines talk about the flying ball bearings that were over the battle zone. And during this time, we were really, the battles in Fallujah were pretty intense in April. Like April, we did what was April? April was Vigilant Resolve. Vigilant Resolve was in April. And then we did Operation Phantom Fury in November of 2004. But those were the big battles to overtake Fallujah. And the Marines were telling me, as we were out there talking, they were saying that they were seeing what they described as flying ball bearings flying over the battle zone. They said these things, they, talked about them looking like kind of like Mylar balloons or ball bearings or whatnot. And that just caught my ear. And I told them, I said, hey, I think I've seen that over Camp Fallujah. I've seen a few of those just floating over, tell me more about it. And as they sat there and talked about them, they said these things were pulling some pretty fantastic maneuvers. They said they would zip in and zip out was the words they were using. They said they would zip in, hang around, kind of float, and they would zip out. So I heard these stories, increasingly. The longer I was there, the more I heard these stories. So by the time I was getting ready to leave in November, I had accumulated quite a few of these stories of these guys talking about these flying ball bearings. And what was really particularly interesting to me was the Marines were saying that they had tried to shoot them down. They said, on top of the Humvees, you had the M240 Gulf, which is the belt-fed machine gun, and the recon Marines, rather, really specifically. I was out there with the 1st Marine Division, so there were several infantry divisions. There was a 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines, 1st Battalion, 3rd Marines, 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, and then for the recon, which was housed right next to me, I was right next door to the 1st Recon, 1st Marine Division. So I mainly was talking to the recon Marines. And the recon Marines were telling me that they were shooting at these things. One guy said that one flew over and zipped in and just hovered over him about 50 feet in the air. And he said he unloaded a 240 Gulf on it. And he said, we couldn't knock the thing down. And I remember talking to him about that. What do you mean you couldn't knock it down? He said, we couldn't hit it. And I said, you couldn't knock it down? Like you were hitting it and it was armored, or you just couldn't knock it down? He said, no, nothing was hitting it. He goes, we could tell we were firing at this thing and nothing was hitting it. And that was just weird. I mean, that kind of made the hairs on my arms stand up when he talked about this. And then 2 of them that oddly enough were brothers. There was 2 twins out there. And I remember this because I thought it was so cool that these twin brothers were out there together in the battle. And they got to arguing because one of them started telling the story about how one of them just disappeared. He said it flew over the top of him and it just disappeared. And his brother said, no, it didn't disappear. It took off so fast, it just looked like it disappeared. But the other brother said he could tell it was tracking. He said when you looked, you could see like kind of like a trail that it had left behind. And the other brother was saying, no, it just disappeared instantaneously. But again, I remember thinking like, wow, that sounds like instantaneous acceleration. And I had seen something again, going back to the Saratoga. When I was on the Saratoga in 1992, I saw something out at sea that what I would describe as instantaneous acceleration. So, those stories really piqued my interest. And then, over the years, that was 2004. And over the years, I kind of put that into the back of my mind. But what really made me remember all of this was when Jeremy Corbell came out with that Mosul orb. When he finally released that footage and people were debating on X whether that was real or whether it was a balloon. I knew immediately that that footage was legit, because I mean that's exactly what I saw, what I personally saw on 5 or 6 occasions over Fallujah, Iraq, and Camp Fallujah rather. And that's what the recon Marines were saying they were actually seeing downtown Fallujah as they were doing these battles. Again, the footage that I had commented on that brought me to talking about this with you was the clip you posted either yesterday or the day before. That one looked like it had antennas on it. Mine didn't. Mine were just, like I said, they were just spheres, just metal spheres. And the Marines that were talking about the ones they saw, same thing. They didn't talk about any kind of appendages or antennas or anything coming off of them. It was just as they called it, a flying ball bearing. So, so I think that footage that Jeremy Corbell released is absolutely authentic and exactly correlates to what we saw out there in 2004.
And did any of your buddies that saw these things doing rapid maneuvers, I mean, obviously it sounds like they were actually in combat situations at the time, but did any of them film these orbs?
No, they didn't. Like I said, it was 2004 was a different time. I mean, there were cameras out there. People did have disposable cameras, and they did have, I think there were some cell phones back then that did have cameras on them. But no, it was really nasty out there in 2004. We didn't have time to really take pictures or doing that kind of stuff. Nothing was captured by these guys.
And can you talk a little bit about this other experience that you said you had when you were out on the ocean?
Well, that's the one that's the most interesting to me, and I've tried for years. I've talked to several people, several researchers, and tried to see if there's anybody else talking about this. And so in 1992, that was my first cruise. I was 18 years old, 18 maybe 19 years old, and I got deployed aboard the USS Saratoga for a Mediterranean cruise. So we left in March or April of 1992, and got home in November, I guess, October, November. But on that cruise, we made the news because I can't remember. I want to say it was September, maybe August or September. We supposedly accidentally blew up a Turkish battleship. So we were doing maneuvers out in the Mediterranean, what they call, just battle maneuvers. You go out there and you play, you get other countries involved, and you just play war games. And during this war game, we accidentally supposedly launched 2 Sea Sparrow missiles, which are surface to air missiles. We launched 2 Sea Sparrow missiles, and they took off, and they hit a Turkish battleship that was in our battle group playing with us, and blew the superstructure off the ship, killing quite a few people. And it was a big deal. We got ordered to come back home almost immediately. The captain got relieved of duty. But, prior to that happening, about 2 weeks prior to that, again, I was enlisted at this time, and I was an aviation ordnanceman. We had on the spots and on the ass of the ship, you had to take the trash down there and get rid of the trash. And I had trash detail, so I was taking the trash down to the back of the ship that night. And you gave it to the guy, and then they throw it in a big incinerator. But I was like one of the last ones to come down to the ship that night and gave the trash. And me and the trash guy were just sitting there talking. And in the wake of the ship, there's a picture. I'll have to try to find a clip and share it with you. But someone had posted a clip, maybe it was a year ago, and it showed a bright yellow type of light coming into the wake of. So there's a ship out at sea, and what you see in the wake of the ship is there's this bright, glowing yellow ball of light that kind of comes up to the wake and sits there and then goes back down. That's exactly what I saw behind the wake of the Saratoga in 92, about 2 weeks before this incident happened with the Turkish ship. I mean, we were sitting out there talking, me and the guy were talking, all of a sudden, this huge yellow light floated up, was right below the disturbance of our wake. Our wake, is about 90 foot wide, and this thing hit both edges of the wake. So the light was at least 90 foot wide, and it just glowed, almost like a soft yellow light bulb right underneath the water, and then it went back down. Just as quick as it came up, it went back down. And both he and I were like, what in the hell was that? So me being an 18, 19-year-old kid, I ran back to my shop and started telling the other AOs, aviation ordnancemen, what I saw. And of course, at sea, they all think you're lying, and they made fun of me and they joked about it. But I mean, it was something very bizarre. I didn't know what it was. And I mean, it wasn't a submarine. It wasn't lights from the Saratoga. It was just, it was probably 200 feet behind the ship, and 90 foot wide. And I don't know, but what struck me was I saw that, and then 2 weeks later we had this accident aboard the Saratoga where we blew up the Turkish ship. But as I was in chow, so that was the talk of the ship when that happened. Everybody was talking about it, what had gone on. And so I was down in the chow hall eating, and next to me were 2 guys that were worked up on the bridge with the captain, 2 enlisted guys. I distinctly remember the one guy being an E5, because he had a crow with 2 stripes, and I was a E nothing at the time. But this guy was talking to his buddy on the that had been on the bridge with him, and they were talking about these fast movers. I remember they used that term, fast movers, and I was like, what the hell are they talking about? And as I sat there and kind of eavesdropped, they were saying that the battle group had been tracking something that was going underneath the water and that was moving at 200 to 300 knots and had been buzzing around the battle group for like the last 2 weeks. And that caught my ear because I was like, oh, wow, 2 weeks ago I saw that weird light. These guys are saying they've been tracking something under the water doing it 200 to 300 knots underneath the water. And, they've been tracking it in the battle group. And then one of them said something to the effect of like, I can't believe when it came out of the water, we shot at it and they redirected the missiles. And I remember that word, man, saying redirected the missiles. So I was like, what the hell are they talking about? So I went up and started talking to my chief at the time aboard the ship and started telling him what I heard down in the chow hall. And I said, this sounds like we shot at something. We didn't accidentally shoot these sparrows by mistake. It sounds like they saw something, they shot at it, and these missiles were redirected. And the chief just basically told me to stop talking about it and forget it. But still to this day, my gut feeling has always been that wasn't an accident. I mean, to launch Sea Sparrow missiles by accident during an exercise would take a lot of failures. I mean, we have multiple steps to ensure that kind of stuff doesn't happen. And of course, the captain was relieved of the Saratoga. Multiple people in the chain of command were relieved for that quote unquote accident. But still to this day, it's my firm belief that whatever I saw that light lit up in the wake was probably what these guys said they were tracking for 2 weeks. And it sounds like they popped out of the water and they took a shot at them with Sea Sparrow missiles, and those Sea Sparrows were redirected and struck a battleship. But yeah, it was just it was a light that started out almost as a pinpoint, and then it grew larger. So it's almost like you could see it at depth, deeper. It was small, and then as it rose to the wake, it grew in size, got about 90 foot wide, and then it slowly started shrinking back down and looking as though it was getting deeper. But it was, like I said, it just almost as if you took a yellow light bulb and just kind of slowly lifted it up to the surface of the water and then took it right back down again. And the whole thing lasted maybe 2 minutes, if even that, maybe 90 seconds. It just came up, lit up, and then went right back down. And both me and the guy on the sponson were just like, what the hell was that? We were like, yeah, that's, I was new to the Navy. I was new to being at sea, but I knew that was something weird. Well, I definitely think it was a USO, whatever they're calling, underwater, what they call them, USOs now is what they're referring to them as instead of, so, I think it obviously was some kind of craft that was under the water that was, probably mirroring our battle group, watching what we were doing, came up to the surface for a little bit and went back down. As far as, what went on later with the accident that was involved with that, I'm not sure, but my gut has always been that probably what we were seeing out there, what I saw out there was definitely an underwater craft of some type. And then we're talking about 1992, so for it to be something that we would have, I don't know.
And what about the spheres? You got any ideas on what you think they might be?
My gut on those, and just hearing the Marines talk about them, and it sounded like obviously they were doing data collection. I mean, to me, it's undoubted, because they said that as the battles ramped up and got more intense and more fierce, and as they used more ordnance, they said that it was directly correlated to as they used more ordnance and started doing bombing runs and different things. They said these things would just pop up all over the place. They seemed to be specifically interested in the ordnance that was being dropped from the planes out there. So I think they were some kind of data collection device. As far as whose they were, I don't know. I didn't personally see them do anything that was not I didn't see any instantaneous acceleration. I just saw them hovering and slightly moving. So I can't say that they were exhibiting any characteristics that aren't something we could create. But there were no flight surfaces at all. I couldn't see any kind of rotor wash. I couldn't see any heat signatures. It just, like I said, it looked like a floating balloon for me. But if you believe the Marines, which I did, like I said, the first recon Marines I was out there with, they were good guys, and they told the truth, I believe. And based on what they were seeing, I mean, especially when they said they unloaded a 240 on them on a couple occasions and couldn't even scratch them. I don't know. I mean, that makes me feel like there was some kind of force field around it. Are these things using some kind of, gravitics that's causing it to, not be able to be touched by typical ordnance? I mean, I don't know, but my gut tells me that if they're ours, they're deeply classified. If they're not ours, I mean, I still go back and forth with all this stuff. I mean, I know people are now saying that the infamous Tic Tac. There's sources out there saying that they're saying that was a deep project, a deep, one of ours, but I don't know. I don't think we're going to get anything from the government, man. I mean, it's just, so I'm one of your vets that will talk about the Iraq war, probably different than most guys will. When I was out there, I was thrown into some things that I didn't agree with. I mean, I saw our government, I saw our military, doing things that were basically completely against the Geneva Convention Code. I mean, I saw us doing false flag attacks. I saw us doing things, creating scenarios where we could sell it to the American people and get authorization to do things that were totally that were totally untrue, to be honest. And then we were out there. We had some embedded news organizations with us that I was, like I said, at the time I was 30 years old. I was a non-political guy. I pretty much believed America told the truth and was a shining beacon on the hill of morality. And I came back from Iraq pretty broken about our government, realized that the American government is a pretty shady organization. And the stuff that we did out in Iraq and we were ordered to do, and the way they manipulated the story, and this is the truth. I came back just not trusting any element of the Department of Defense whatsoever. So, you asked me, do I think that the Department of Defense or anybody that's ever been involved with the Department of Defense at any level is out there trying to really bring about the truth? No, I don't. I think we have. I mean, you see me on X. I've been pretty critical of Lou Elizondo. Now, like when Lou first came out, I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt, but then where me and Lou kind of got sideways was again with the whole torture program. I mean, Lou ran Gitmo, and I saw, as a trauma nurse in Iraq, I had to take care of both sides. I had to take care of our guys and the Iraqis, and so I was thrown into the mix where I had to take care of people that had undergone stuff that was just against my moral compass, stuff that shouldn't have been done. So to know that Lou was a part of that and was in charge of that and did that for his country, it just makes him suspect, and it makes everything that he's a part of suspect for me. So and any of those guys, any of these guys that were involved with the government, now they claim they're trying to do the right thing and break free of the government and tell us the truth and help bring about disclosure. I don't believe it. I don't believe it for a second. I don't trust anybody that's in the Department of Defense at any level. Just because I was too close to it. I was too close to it for 23 years of my military career, and I was too close to it in Iraq, and I watched them literally do things and then frame it. I watched them do things that were completely illegal against the Geneva Convention Code, and then I watched them bring the news organizations in and frame it in a way that was completely opposite of what happened, and to place the blame upon the Iraqi people. And it's just so for me, when the U.S. government's involved in anything, I just don't really trust it, and I don't think for a second that any of these senators or congressmen. I mean, there's some good guys out there. I like Tim Burchett. I mean, I think Tim Burchett is a straight shooter. I like him, but I think most of his colleagues, most of his peers, they're bought and paid for. I mean, at the end of the day, I believe everybody in our government is bought and paid for. Everybody has a price, and and whether they do it for nefarious reasons or they do it because they think they're doing morally the right thing to protect us, at the end of the day, they're not. I don't think they're going to bring about truth. I'm a full believer in that we have this tech. I will say that I'm a full believer in that. I do think there was crashes in Roswell. I think we recovered that. I do think there have been multiple crashes throughout our history here in America, and I think we have recovered it. And I think they've worked really hard to reverse engineer it. And I'm a believer. I probably, I'll probably turn people off in saying this, but I believe, a lot of things that Stephen Greer has talked about. I mean, he was, a lot of people talk about Stephen Greer and talk about, his, Stephen does have a little bit of an ego, and he can be a little bit abrasive, but I think at the end of the day, I think Stephen has been working really hard to talk to subject matter experts and get people on board that have had access to these things either firsthand or have been around people that have touched it. And I do believe that we have recovered craft. I do believe we've reverse engineered it, and I believe that our government is hiding it. And in my personal belief is why all this is shaded, shrouded in secrecy, rather, is because of the 0-point energy aspect. I mean, obviously these things need a lot of power to run. They're somehow harnessing 0-point energy, and that is what they're trying to hide. They're trying to hide the fact that 0-point energy exists, and they're trying to keep it on the shelf because, if you let 0-point energy out of the bag, that you're going to destroy a $1 trillion a year, financial sector there. So, that's my personal belief.